We have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
My name is Kerry Tepperman. I live in San Rafael, California. I've had a long career as an educator. For about 20 years, I was the director of a Montessori school. I think empathy, it's a big word that's kind of antiseptic for something that's just so naturally human. That's what I think about. I think that the empathic response is so part of our human experience and so part of who we are. I actually like thinking about it a little bit better as the empathic response rather than empathy. If that makes any sense. Empathy, when you use the word empathy, it feels like a label, and it feels up here somewhere in the brain. And empathy seems to me, when I think of it, when I call it an empathic response, it seems to be more descriptive of actually what the experience of empathy is.
Sounds like there's more of a connection with other people. Maybe you're bringing it into the sense of connection.
Yeah, and empathy is so. It's such. It's an empathic response. Actually, kind of. Language doesn't have to be a part of it. So it's almost like a reflex in a lot of people. It's like when you go into the doctor, they use that little tool to knock your knee, and your knee your leg pops up. I think that's what an empathic response is, and I think that's in a lot of ways as much a part of our system as human beings as that knee popping up. So one of the things I came in here that I really wanted to talk about today, I had something in mind that I wanted to talk about. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was an NVC, an introduction to NVC class that I attended. So when I started learning about NVC, I didn't take an intro to NVC class. I went to a workshop, I read a book. Anyway, I had a friend who wanted to learn about NVC, and so I said, that's okay, I'll go to an intro with you. So after I'd been learning NVC for probably a year, I went to my first intro. And I sat down that night with a room full of people who were thinking really about empathy, a lot of them for the very first time. And we had a little game to play in that group. And basically we sat around in a circle, and one person revealed something about, it could have been something they were celebrating or something that was concerning them in some way. They just revealed something about themselves, and then everyone in the circle had a sheet of paper that had a list of needs on it. And everyone took turns guessing what that person's need might be, so practicing empathy. Most of the people in that circle really didn't feel like they knew what they were doing. They didn't believe in the power of empathy. They just sort of had at it because they'd been asked. And the person who had the expression was really changed. So the fact that it wasn't that people were skilled at empathy, it wasn't that they believed in empathy, it was just the act of guessing a need. And the person who received that empathy was really, really moved and changed by it. So I think that's important, that it's not something you have to believe in, and it's not something you have to be good at. It's just something you have to be willing to try.
And how do you go about trying it? What do you recommend for people to go? How should they try?
Well, I think if they can figure out, I think the best way to start using empathy is to do silent empathy with the people that are close to you. In other words, when someone's speaking, to listen intently, and if you're having judgments of them, to try to develop some kind of understanding of what their needs might be and what their feelings might be, and to listen without offering a lot of strategies or suggestions initially. Just give them the opportunity to be heard.
So when you're feeling, do you feel like more empathic at certain times than others?
Yes.
You say there's like and so when you're feeling very empathic, what does that feel like in your body? What is a felt body sensation?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not maybe the best person to ask. Because I was going to say, I think sometimes whatever I'm feeling kind of mirrors what the person I'm listening to is feeling. So if the person I'm listening to is very sad, I might feel some sadness. Maybe not to the degree that they do, but I might feel some sadness. If the person is agitated, I may feel a little bit of agitation. But so I think it can manifest in different ways.
So it's a whole variety.
Yeah.
It's like empathy is kind of like feeling. For me, I say it's kind of like a cornucopia where you feel the full spectrum of human experience.
And I guess the best way to, and part of it is is that it is, to some degree, that experience of open-heartedness, whether you're saying anything or silent.
A lot of people bring up connection. That it's like
Yeah.
it relates to connection.
Yeah, it does. So if I had to describe open-heartedness, I would describe that as kind of a spaciousness that you can almost feel in this part of your body. I was at a conference 2 or 3 years ago. It was an international conference for Montessori educators. One of the guest speakers was a neuroscientist who's working in Portland, Oregon. Talked about some of the work that he's been doing with empathy. And one of the things that was most striking about the work that he's doing is he's actually been able to determine what it looks like in the brain when people receive empathy. And he's been actually able to do research where he can have some assessment of whether or not children are receiving adequate empathy. And so this is through brain scans. And one of the things that he has come to realize through his research is that we always think of empathy having to do with emotional well-being, but what he has found out in his research is that without adequate empathy, children's cognitive development is going to be hindered. So in other words, you have to have a certain amount of empathy or it limits your actual brain development and it's going to limit your cognitive ability. So one of the comments he made to these hundreds of educators is, we think what we need in this world are more smart people, but right now what we need in this world are more people who can experience empathy. That's what the next generation needs in order to completely have the mental, develop the mental capacity that they're going to need basically to take care of the rest of us when we're in our old age.